go ahead and start with that. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. As a part of National Mentorship Month, we are hosting Allie Boyd, who I have known for probably about 10 years now. She's an amazing woman. She's an executive coach, professor, consultant, facilitator, and speaker. And she is the founder of Evolve Leadership Partners. And what she specializes in is she works with senior leaders and their teams to leverage deep inner work in service of performance and transformational change. In her practice, Allie has worked across the globe, partnering with clients such as Google, McKinsey, Amazon, Dell, Intel, the U.S. Foreign Service, just to name a few. She is also a professor at the University of Denver in their executive education department. And we are so excited to have her today. She's going to be speaking to us about how to coach and provide feedback and helping advance careers, specifically in the mentorship arena. So without further ado, I will pass it off to Allie Boyd.
Thank you so much, Natalie. What a warm introduction, and such a delight to get to be here with all of you. I know I've had a great time getting ready for this with Natalie and Glenn, and just getting ready to be with you. So thanks for being here. Thanks for spending an hour of your time with me. We'll make it worth it. We'll get right to it, and I'm looking forward to it. This is one of my most favorite topics to get to engage with. As Natalie mentioned, I'm an executive coach. I have done this kind of work myself with clients all over the world. I also teach coaching as a practice, and I've led a program in coaching and mentorship and professional development at the University of Michigan at their business school. Now I'm in my 14th year of doing that. So this is just really in the heart of my passion. It's the place that I love to be with people, and I'm so happy to be with you all today. So thanks for having me. Let me tell you a little bit about where we're going today and what we are going to be up to. So the first thing that we're going to do is talk about how can you have conversations that do what it is that you really want them to do, which I'm going to presume in a mentoring or in a coaching context or even in a management context would include greater performance, greater engagement, and greater growth. So how can you is there a way to hack into conversations in a way that's straightforward, but that gives you some traction to do it in a way that you're going to get better results? So the way we're going to do that, our itinerary for today, we're going to do one, just let's take a look at what is a powerful coaching conversation. What does that even mean? What does it mean to have a coaching conversation as compared to maybe a conversation you'd have in the run-of-the-mill part of your day, or you'd have in the course of a regular meeting? Or how can you transition from having those kinds of run-of-the-mill conversations to ones that are going to get you better results? Why are they valuable? Why would we invest in this? Why would we orient towards this and give that time and attention? And how can you start, or how can you improve maybe what you're already doing? So that is the roadmap. That's the itinerary for today. So let's talk a little bit about a coaching conversation and what a coaching conversation is. And really what I want to say is this is it's a technology. I think some of you are in technology, so I use that word intentionally and maybe sort of provocatively. But what is a technology? In the sense that it enables something, it's a mechanism for something else to occur, for us to get a certain kind of result beyond the result that's standard, the result that we typically would be obtaining. So if I'm looking to develop people and I'm looking for performance and growth, this particular methodology is going to enable a different kind of potentially discovery. We're going to wade into places that we might not go because we're coming from a different perspective or a different mindset, with curiosity, with an intention to discover something that we're not coming into the conversation knowing. So there's a distinction there between that and maybe my typical conversations in run-of-the-mill business. We're moving away from an agenda that's set or fixed, or maybe a unilateral agenda that's going to avoid some of the things that happen in our brains that create resistance to change or resistance to collaboration. So that's something most of us would like in our working lives, is how do I collaborate more effectively, or how do I get people to collaborate with me more effectively on the team? We're going to take a look at how to do that. So I want to talk about that there are a number of different kinds of conversations. Of course, we are, there's going to be a check-in conversation. Maybe that's a formal setup you have. Maybe it's a hallway conversation. There's performance conversations, maybe mini performance conversations or larger performance conversations, all the way to the larger conversations around career visioning and, kind of what do I want to be when I grow up, or where do I want to take my career and my profession? All of these occasions would be instances where you could use skills and techniques. And I'm going to invite you into a way of thinking about how to do this strategically, so you can bring effectiveness into any context that you are in. So let's talk a little bit about, let's distinguish between what I would call a confronting conversation and a coaching conversation. So in a confronting conversation, really, the driver for that is around me as the person who's initiating this, my agenda, things I'd like to see different, things I'd like to see changed. There's kind of a fundamental mindset or orientation, around where I'm coming to that. And we know so much now around the brain science of what that might produce in the other person. So we know a lot about mirror neurons, we know different things about neural pathways, and how even the way that I come to a conversation might produce a response in that person before we even begin. So I have the picture up here of these two rams who are getting ready to kind of go at it in an adversarial context. Most of us don't go into conversations expecting that this is what we're trying to create or we're looking to produce. But what we do know is there's lots of ways we can create safety or signal to someone else's brain, hey, I'm here to be in partnership with you. I'm here to join with you in a conversation that's going to be transformative. So the approach we take, the language we use, the mindset we have, all creates the possibility of shifting over to a coaching conversation, or where I can be an agent of growth and change for you. So I love the kind of distinction between these two images, one where we're kind of coming at each other to tussle it out, and another where I'm kind of coming into the conversation with an eye toward discovery or curiosity. So lots of results. I mentioned that there's a huge amount we know from the brain science about how we put people in a learning zone as opposed to a defending or storytelling mode. So particularly in any kind of mentor, coaching, growth and development conversation, probably also in a management conversation, what we want to do is harness people's the best of what they could bring. We want to harness their creativity, their capacity for innovation, their genuine goodwill and discretionary effort, right? That's kind of one of the keys of the game. How do I get more discretionary effort from my people? One of the ways we know we can do that is by creating a context where their brains are engaged in a certain way. Coaching creates an opportunity for my brain, if I'm on the receiving end, to generate its own aha, which it's like it harnesses a huge amount of discretionary effort or potency in the person who's going to then come forward to engage. So lots of reasons why it might be beneficial to engage in a coaching conversation. So we're going to get down into it more specifically. And what I'd like to do is invite you, please, right now, this would be a good time to get a pen, a paper, something to write with, because we're actually going to take you through and give you an opportunity to bring to mind a person, real example in your life or in your world right now who you are interested in having a coaching conversation with, or a mentor conversation, somebody who you'd like to get some traction with to see something change or support them in their growth and development. So please take a moment, grab a pen, a pencil, a pad of paper, something to write with, so you can track as we go along in the presentation your own example. And in a little while, we'll put you in a breakout room so you have an ability to chat a little bit about how you're making sense of this, what you're thinking, maybe what your example is, and you can workshop a little bit with other colleagues and take a chance to see what's there. So in that spirit, this is a good time to choose something that's pretty low stakes. So this is probably not the biggest conflict you've got in your professional or your personal life, not a domain that it's really dicey and you're not sure kind of how to begin. A conversation that you're thinking, this isn't maybe the biggest place to begin, but something that's a low stakes place that's okay to talk about in a breakout room with a couple of colleagues. So go ahead and bring an example to mind and maybe jot the name of the person at the top of your paper who you will keep in mind as we go through our slides together. Okay. So let's talk about this and what are the 3 elements of powerful coaching conversations and how to create them. So what I first want to do is we're going to go very first to this concept of starting with why. So we want to think about starting with why, and Simon Sinek famously, some of you may know his work, will tell us we always want to begin almost anything we do with why, but particularly in the context of a coaching conversation. The second step is to go into thinking in levels, thinking about the anatomy of a conversation and the levels of every conversation we have. I've personally found this one very useful, not only in my professional life, but in my home life too. And the next thing we want to do is think about the mindset for success. So we're going to march through these one by one, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to track the example you're thinking about as we move along. So the first piece is to get clear on your why, and really to take a moment to think about what would success look like here for you. If you step back from this person whose name you wrote down on the paper and think about the end result you might like to see, what would success look like if this conversation or series of conversations really went well? What result would occur from your conversations or from this process that you'd like to undertake? What are you hoping to accomplish would be another way of saying that. What makes this important? What would you like to see come out of this as a result? Another thing that I'd like to invite is, have you gotten into that person's perspective? And if you were to take a moment to think about, what would you see if you looked at the world through their eyes? If they knew that this person knew that you were doing an exercise right now and kind of conceptualizing success, what might their answer be around what success would look like from this interaction? So take a moment, write down a few thoughts on what is the why behind having this conversation at all? What would be there to begin with? So one of the things we know about good coaching practice, and again, we're going back into the neurology of this all, is we know that the key place to begin is to come from a sense of discovery and genuine curiosity to understand people and their view of the situation, their view of the world, how they're experiencing what they're experiencing. Most of us come into conversations, most of our interactions in work and oftentimes at home, with a pretty sure idea of how we think things are, right? Most of us sort of feel like, me included, I can go asleep at the wheel. We have a pretty good sense of reality and what's true, and my perspective is probably accurate. So coming into most conversations, it can be easy to forget about backing up enough to think about, well, if this person were standing here, what might they say, right? So not my vision or my version of how I think things should be or how I think they are, but what's truly the perspective from the inside out from this other party. So if anything occurs to you there as you're thinking through this person, take some notes, get some sort of curiosity going, jot some ideas down. This is the place to really get grounded on why having this conversation and what would success look like. The next piece of a powerful coaching conversation we'll go into is thinking in levels. So there are 3 levels of all conversations. This is some of my most favorite work. This comes out of Harvard, actually in the late 1990s. Stone, Patton, and Heen, a very famous trio of researchers. The work that they've done on this has been used around the world in all sorts of peace negotiations, like really high stakes conflict settings. Again, with governments, with private organizations, public organizations all across the world, it's been this foundational for thinking about how to turn a difficult conversation into a learning conversation. So the way that they help us do this is by thinking of 3 levels of every single conversation. This is one I will tell you has been enormously beneficial for me as a person in my life, with my clients, just about in every domain. So if you can take anything from this session, this would be one that I would take with you and make sure that you make good use of. So let's go through the levels. The first level is the what's happening conversation. And again, this goes back to really walking a mile in somebody else's shoes. We know so much about perception and about the brain. There's a beautiful new book that just came out in 2021 that really dives into the topic of perception and how the same stimuli on the outside, we make sense of differently in our brain and the way we experience it. The science is so good on this. So we know that 2 people experiencing the same situation undoubtedly have a different story to tell about what's happening, why it's happening, and how it's happening, and why it matters. So first in any conversation is to see if you can get really grounded in what's actually here. What are the facts? How are you experiencing this? How are you seeing it? To get just very deeply grounded in what's over there for you, and let's talk about what's over there for me. Doing just that will really get you very far down the path. So first level, what is even happening? Let's get on the same page. Second level of any conversation that's most essential to understand, this level is around the feelings. Now, most times when I talk to people about this, what I hear is, come on, this is professional life. I'm in business. Like, do we really have to talk about feelings at work? I mean, I do that in other domains. So this is where I would say we know that human beings come into our professional environments, and it's a great thing that actually we don't leave our full selves at the door. And here's why. A couple of reasons. One, we leak anyway. So if you've ever had a day where you're working with a colleague or a boss or a coworker or a direct report, and you know that they're having a bad day, and you say, hey, are you okay? Is everything okay? And they don't give you a straight answer, but you can tell something's off. That's an example of trying to step over what's really there. It actually gets in the way of effectiveness, and it gets in the way of performance. And what we know is workplaces where we can take these things in, digest them, and move on, we can actually harness better performance, deeper levels of trust, and more effective collaboration. So there's a lot to be said for, can we effectively metabolize and digest feelings appropriately at work? We know that it doesn't work to pretend they don't exist. And when we do, it can actually serve as a catalyst for more effective performance. So the upshot is, we do have to talk about feelings at work, or it would serve us well to do so. Level 3 of all conversations. So far we have the what happened layer, the feelings layer, and this is really where people either dig in their heels or will be ready to run through a wall for you. The identity conversation is at the core of all conversations. And here's what that means. It's about what's at stake for me in my kind of fundamental okayness as a human being. So the core human needs, I mean, some of these are listed here, and check these for yourself and check these as we kind of consider your example. The need to belong, the need to be part of something that's bigger than me or feel like I'm a part of a group, deeply embedded kind of animal human need to be part of something, the need to be loved, the need to be competent, the need to be seen as smart or respectable. So many of these core needs are actually at the bottom of what shows up on the surface in a way that may sometimes not make sense, right? Like, I just asked you to follow up on the expense report from last week. I don't know why that person lost their head. Well, what it might have triggered at the third level of the conversation is that you don't think I'm competent, or you don't think I'm intelligent enough, or you don't believe that I care enough to pay attention. So people, when you notice, that's always a good red flag for me, when I notice someone's reaction is outsized to the scale of the problem that we're actually dealing with, it's often a good sign that something's gotten activated or something's gotten triggered at this third level, which is at the identity level, right? Something has gotten sort of tangled up for this person, or maybe it's touched a nerve that's a sensitive spot for them around what's really at stake. So we have to remember, again, it's like all of us in our human lives are coming to our professional workplaces as our whole selves. We bring it all. Most of it, we often are able to sort of professionally manage, but to know from a perspective of coaching, mentoring, leadership, that everybody we're working with is up against this at some level can allow you to be a bit more strategic and savvy about the way you're structuring your conversation. So let's just review and give you a moment to think. There's 3 levels to every conversation, 3 levels. So the first level, what's happening? My perspective, your perspective, our difference in perception. What's actually happening here? The second, what are the feelings? How do each of us feel about what's happening? I'm excited. I'm anxious. I'm elated. I'm nervous. I'm really disappointed. What's the feelings level? And then third, the identity piece. I know it's really important for you, Jamie, to feel like a part of the team and to know that we value and appreciate your contribution. That's an example of speaking into that third level of identity conversation. So take a quick moment, check out your list, check out your paper in front of you. Again, bring to mind that person that you're thinking about in this workshop. And what would you guess is the layers happening for that person? Just a couple notes. I'll give you a few more minutes once I'm done with the whole sort of presentation overview. If you'd like to take a few notes now, it's a good moment.
Allie, just a quick question that we had in the comments box. What was the name of the book you were referring to earlier? Can you?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for the question, Natalie. Happy to send some resources afterwards as well. The book is called Difficult Conversations, and it's by Stone, Patton, and Heen. It is I think it's the Harvard Review Press. It's it's a very famous book and well worth your time. So yeah, thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Okay. So we've gotten 2 steps in powerful coaching conversations. The first is, can you get clear on your why and what would success look like? The next piece is to think in levels. What are the 3 levels that might be going on here or that I could bring my attention to in order to be more effective? Third piece, this is a big one, is to shift your own mindset. For most of us, this is where the real work begins. So shifting our mindset. So what does this really look like? This has to do with coming in with a posture of genuine curiosity, coming in with a real openness to discovery and a real desire to listen. Now, what makes this hard, right? What makes this really hard for those of us who are either, busy, don't have a lot of extra space or a lot of extra capacity, or want to be really efficient, which, as far as I can tell from the work I do, most of us feel like that most of the time. It can be challenging to come in with an eye towards genuine curiosity and openness, because what it can mean is I actually have to let go of control of where this conversation is going to go. For many leaders I work with and for many folks who are in coaching or management positions, that is a tough one to let go of, because I kind of give up the reins of driving the direction we're going. So there's a mindset in this, but there's also this deep humility to be able to say, all right, let's find out what's here. Can I sort of let go of my agenda and come in with a genuine curiosity and a mindset of discovery? Can I find out what is here? Here's a key insight for us, and this is Ed Schein at MIT has done some amazing work about this. We know what happens from a neurological perspective when we come in with an objective of fixing or managing or changing according to an agenda we have. So I love this picture here because I have a teenager. Some of you may also have kids, or maybe remember back to your own teenage years when it's like a good suggestion that was helpful from your parents, actually at a neurological level. We actually see it in teenagers because they poorly manage it in front of their parents, their response. It creates a reaction that says no. So the fixing, when someone is coming at us with a fixing instinct or helpful suggestions, it actually produces a survival instinct in the brain. We may get a short-term corrective, right? So parents can attest to this all over the world. You may get a short-term corrective, but what you won't get is a long-term change. So the long-term change that we're looking for is something that's like, oh, it becomes something that's self-generated or self-sourced. So what we want to be doing is in a coaching conversation, of course, not just looking for a quick fix. Somebody's going to go along with us to kind of get us off their back, even if it's not at a conscious or an kind of outward level. But what we want to do is harness the deep desire to do something differently that comes from within. So we want to anchor in a hopeful future. So what does this look like? How do we actually facilitate people discovering their own sort of ideal future self, right? Like how do we actually shift into, from our language, a place where people can access and harness this, not I'm going to reject from a survival perspective, but I'm going to be willing to step into. So what we want to do is we want to, in our language and in our coaching conversations, anchor people in their ideal selves. So what does this look like? There's all sorts of wonderful ways of thinking about this, some really great work. Richard Boyatzis and his colleagues at Case Western University have done great work in this domain. Fabulous book called Helping People Change. I'd really recommend. It's brand new in the last few years. I might even be able to show you a copy of it after our breakout. But the goal here is to trigger people into the generative thinking zone, or into a generative learning zone where they feel like they take the lead. So there's, the great old sort of, this is in sort of a funny way, the movie, The Big Fat Greek Wedding from a few decades ago, has this great conversation where they talk about being the neck, and it's like the neck that turns the head. What we really want is for people to feel like they are sufficiently empowered to be in charge of and have the generative capacity to take the lead on their own changes. That's what creates the most enduring change. We know from a brain perspective that it lights up the part of the brain that's accountable for action, solving problems, generating novel and innovative solutions. For most of us, much of what we're trying to uncover in life and work. So when we have a particular kind of question, you can take people into what's called the ought self mode. And a good example of this can come from a classic, sort of behavioral change situation around like quitting smoking. So we know, we have great data, and you may even know from your own experience, connecting people to the ought self is like hitting a brick wall in terms of creating change that really takes root. So an example of this might be in the doctor's office saying, smoking is bad for your health. You know that it's increasing your risk for all sorts of other major issues. You really should stop. What that does is take people into a domain where it lights up the parts of the brain that says, I'm going to resist this. And it's very hard to create behavior change from that. Now, the ideal self, hooking into the ideal self, invites people into a future version of their self that they feel empowered to create, that feels alluring and like they want to step into it. So what might it look like for the healthiest version of you to show up at your appointment here next year? What would it take? What would be the first next step you might engage in? So just notice the difference in those two frames, and also the difference that it might produce in your own brain in terms of response, or in the brains of the folks that you're trying to support with development, with professional growth, etc. So a roundup. Where have we been around how to create a powerful coaching conversation as a catalyst for these things that many of us want to see in our workplaces: performance, engagement, and growth? First thing, start with why. What makes this important? What would success look like here from my perspective, and putting myself in the shoes of the other person? Second piece, think in levels. Think about layers of a conversation. And first of all, can I even get grounded in what's happening here? Second, what are the feelings, or how do we both feel about this? And third, what's the identity conversation, or what's at stake, or what might be at stake for this person that I could first and foremost reassure so we can proceed into solving for whatever else is here. The next piece is to come with a mindset that is going to support growth. So what we want to do is we want to get people into their ideal selves so that they're becoming self-generating, as opposed to putting people in an ought-self zone where we know the brain puts up resistance. All right, so we're going to gather some of these and apply them now to the situation you were thinking about to give it a chance to track into your brain, give you a chance to play with this and explore a little bit further. So what I'd like to do is I'll give you a few minutes here to go through each of these and apply them to your to the person that you've been thinking about all along. What is the why for the coaching conversation that you're wanting to have? What are the levels? How are you going to set their brain up for a learning conversation? And then finally, what do you genuinely want to discover? How can you put them in a spot so that they can tap into their ideal self? So go ahead, we'll take a few minutes. I'll give you about 4 minutes to do that thinking and chart. I would recommend like a matrix or a chart on the paper in front of you. We'll be quiet and give you a moment to take that on. Enjoy.